Part 13. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 121. I saw only the shadow of the water. The two bloodthirsty Huoyi walked slowly in a deep canyon with black magic pythons on their feet. Their bloodthirsty eyes looked around from time to time, with a hint of vigilance in their expressions. Wu Su looked at Yun Fengji and said with a smile, "But them." Yun Fengji nodded, it was indeed them. But there was still a trace of confusion on their faces. He looked at Wu Su and asked, "I wonder if I can ask you. I didn't tell you clearly about their faces. How did you know about their faces without asking them clearly?" Hearing this, Wu Su laughed and chuckled, "That's because I felt the same aura as yours on them, so I could detect it. Although the aura on your body cannot be seen or touched, as the master of this secret realm, I can feel the two of them skillfully. After all, among all the people in the secret realm, these two are the only ones who fit the bill." Yun Fengji nodded thoughtfully, glanced at Wu Su, opened her mouth slightly, said thank you, and then said, "I wonder if you can give me a direction so that I can find them." Upon hearing this, Wu Su waved his hand, smiled and said no. I saw a space crack appearing in front of Yun Fengji. Wu Su pointed at the space crack with his finger and said, "You only need to enter this crack to reach the vicinity of the two of them. You don't need to go through so much trouble to find them." As if he knew what Yun Fengji was going to say next, he answered again, "After all, you have to help to the end." Seeing this, Yun Fengji was stunned for a moment, but said thank you and turned around and walked in. Within a moment, the space crack slowly closed. Seeing this situation, Wu Su smiled helplessly, grabbed the little thing off his head, played with it in his hands, and sighed, "Where should I go? Finished. Just see the other side." Yun Fengji's tall figure appeared in the canyon. Not far from her were Bloodthirsty and Huoyi. Yun Fengji's position was directly in front of the two of them. Judging from the direction of the two of them, they would arrive here without waiting long. See this. Yun Fengji folded her hands around her chest, closed her beautiful eyes, and leaned against the wall quietly, patiently waiting for the two of them to arrive. Almost half the time it takes to burn incense has passed. The two bloodthirsty people arrived here in the fire demon python. Huoyi happened to glance at Yun Fengji, who was standing aside, and touched his eyes, as if he was a little unbelievable. After understanding it, his expression showed a hint of amazement. He glanced at Xuexie beside him and said softly, "Brother Xuexie, do you think this woman looks a bit like senior sister Yun Fengji?" Hearing Huoyi's words, his bloodthirsty brows raised slightly, and he looked down, and found that it was really Yun Fengji, and he couldn't help but be stunned for a while. Then he immediately jumped down, looked at Yun Fengji and exclaimed, "Why are you here? And you are right in front of us. Did you get anything good in Secret Realm?" Hearing the bloodthirsty words, Yun Fengji opened her eyes, looked at him expressionlessly, shook her head and said, "I didn't get anything, I just met a very powerful master, and with his help, I found you and sent me to you." Hearing Yun Fengji's words, his bloodthirsty expression flashed and he nodded slightly. "I understand. In that case, let's walk together." Yun Fengji nodded, looked at the huge black python in front of her, and asked, "Is this monster contracted by you in Secret Realm?" Bloodthirsty nodded. "Not bad. The strength of this monster has reached the martial arts venerable realm world. If it weren't for the restrictions of this secret realm, I don't need to think of anything. I can control it through the entire secret realm with just the move of my fingers." Having said this, a smile appeared on the bloodthirsty face, as if he was showing off something to Yun Fengji. But Yun Fengji did not speak, but used her spiritual power to jump onto the head of the black demon python. He also happened to jump in front of Huoyi. Smelling the special fragrance that belonged to Yun Fengji, Huoyi couldn't help but blush a little. He touched his head in embarrassment and took a few steps back. Finally, he called senior sister Yun Fenji. Yun Fenji glanced at him with a strange expression and nodded slightly. Then, a bloodthirsty figure appeared in front of the two of them, glanced at Yun Fenji with a cold expression, and stamped the black python's head with his foot, indicating that it should continue to move forward. The black demonic python seemed to understand the meaning. The figure crawled forward slowly. It took nearly half an hour. The black python led the three people through the canyon and came to a pool full of dark water. The three people on the head looked nearby with frowning eyes. Listening to the rushing sound of water, Yun Fenji's complexion changed for no apparent reason. Putting aside his bloodlust, he said softly, "Have you sensed anything strange under this pool of water?" Hearing this, Bloodthirsty didn't answer. Instead, a pair of eyes that were glowing with will-o'-the-wisp stared intently at the pool water below. Their eyes seemed to penetrate the outside of the pool water and see inside. After a few breaths, Bloodthirsty took half a step back with his legs and feet, as if he had seen something unbelievable, his expression slightly shocked. Then he immediately withdrew his eyes. Looking at the bloodthirsty expression, Huoyi felt a little strange and couldn't help but ask, "Brother Bloodthirsty, what did you see? Why is the expression so strange?" Bloodthirsty did not reply to him, but looked at Yun Fenji aside and said, "You should have felt it too." Yun Fenji nodded. The bloodthirsty expression became serious. "It seems that there are some unknown reasons why the dragons disappeared on the profound heaven continent. It can't be seen now because they are all hidden in the secret realm or the mysterious realm land." "What? Dragon?" When Huoyi on the side heard this, he looked shocked. He quickly asked, "Brother Bloodthirsty, is what you just said true? You know, there has been no dragon in profound heaven continent for tens of thousands of years. It is rumored that all of them have disappeared, or have been transmigrated to the upper world. If what you just said is true, this will cause the big forces to become restless." Bloodthirsty glanced at him, nodded and said, "Yes, there is indeed a huge black dragon sleeping under this deep pool. And from what I've noticed, the aura on it is very strange. It's obviously something from this world, but you can't tell. Especially the aura on it. I observed it carefully, but I can't see through it at all. It seems like it does not have the aura of the powerful martial emperor at all, but instead flows into a noble and primitive mysterious aura." Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 122. Yun Fenji's expression changed, and she looked at Xuexiang and asked him to continue. Looking at Yun Fenji, Bloodthirsty nodded expressionlessly. "If it's not as expected, the strength of this dragon may have reached the legendary semi-immortal realm, and it's not impossible to even rise to another realm." At this point, the bloodthirsty tone paused for a moment, thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "We can't anger it now. It is not an existence that we can anger now. We must wait until our strength recovers in the future." Yun Fenji nodded, "That's natural, just don't wake it up." The words fell. I saw that Qin Xian in Profound Heaven Sect also heard the words of several people talking. Dragon? It seems that this Tianxian secret realm is very mysterious. It's not like what others said. Qin Xian's eyes flickered slightly. "Besides, I haven't really seen a dragon since I was reborn here for so long. The only one I really saw was the azure dragon that the system rewarded me that time, but it's not fully grown, and you can't see anything yet. You still have to be strong to decrypt it. Say it." Qin Xian's eyes were fixed on the three people in the mirror. The black demonic python had already fled here with a frightened face under the bloodthirsty order. He led the three of them to a valley full of rotten smell. There are monster bones and rotting corpses everywhere here. If you look closely, you can find that there are even demon spirits floating around slowly, like ghosts. However, the three of them did not look scared, but looked at these demons with a hint of amusement. Especially Bloodthirsty, his facial expression already showed provocation. Because they know that there is a powerful black demon python, this group of demon spirits with low strength have no courage to come close. Because their strength is only useful to people with low realms. For those with high realms, their terrifying faces and some special methods are of no use to others at all. Even if you are only one level higher than it, you don't have to be afraid of it, because this thing, in layman's terms, is a thing that likes to use its power to overwhelm others. If you meet someone with a lower level, it will scare you half to death, and I pull my hair out when I meet someone with a high level, and I'm scared. Smelling the fishy smell coming from nearby, Yun Fengji frowned slightly. She didn't like this place very much. Looking at the Bloodthirsty, she said, "Why did you let this monster bring us here? It's not just for nothing are you provoking these demon spirits." Hearing Yun Fengji's question, he glanced at her bloodthirstily, shook his head, stared deeply into the valley and said, "Because there are beast beads here, otherwise would I have come here without any problems." Beast beads. Yun Fengji's expression darkened, and she looked at Xue. Her expression seemed to say, "Do you think I'm easy to deceive?" Seeing this expression, Xue spread his hands and said helplessly, "Don't worry. As for lying to you on this occasion, show you something and you will know." Then Bloodthirsty took out a dark bead from the ring. "It's the beast bead." Bloodthirsty held it in his hand and waved it in front of Yun Fengji, and said, "I'm not lying to you. I brought you here because I felt the breath of the beast bead. If you hadn't been by my side today, I have led Huoyi to devour it all by myself a long time ago, and I won't even tell you about it. You still think I'm lying to you? After all, we have been friends for tens of thousands of years, and you don't even have this little trust." Bloodthirsty shook his head, looking a little disappointed. "How could I know if you didn't take it out earlier?" Yun Fengji said helplessly, spreading her hands. Bloodthirsty said nothing. He patted the black python on the head and told it to go into the valley. Seeing this, the black demon python nodded its head. Then he slowly climbed towards the center of the valley. Swish, swish, swish. The valley was extremely silent, and the only sound that could be heard was the slow crawling of the black python. Yun Fengji glanced at Xue 11's side and said, "How far do you think we are from the beast bead?" Hearing Yun Fengji's question, Bloodthirsty thought for a moment before speaking, "That aura is very strong, I'm not sure. But it still takes an hour." Yun Fengji nodded coldly. She didn't care how long it took, as long as she could get the beast bead in the end. In this way, the black python crawled slowly for an hour, and finally came to a cave full of fog. Xue and Yun Fengji looked at each other. Huoyi looked at them with a strange expression, but still said nothing. The words fell. In the end, Bloodthirsty asked Huoyi and the black demonic python to wait outside, while he and Yun Fengji went inside to look for the beast beads. After all, Bloodthirsty is not sure what he will encounter later. Just in case, that's all. Also, the cave is as big as the cave, and the black python is too big to enter. Then, the two of them walked in with 12 points of vigilance on their faces. There was a lot of fog inside, and both of them used spiritual power to surround themselves to isolate the fog from physical contact. After almost half a stick of incense, the two of them arrived at a palace that was not too big or too small. There are 8 statues of ferocious beasts standing around the palace. In the middle of all the statues, there is a stone pillar half a man tall, with a dark black bead placed on top of the stone pillar. Bloodthirsty happened to raise his eyes and saw this scene. Looking at Yun Fengji, she said, "As expected, the beads on the table should be animal beads. I felt a very strong aura in them." Yun Fengji nodded and followed his eyes and looked in. "I found that there was indeed a dark black bead sitting there. Should I go there alone, or?" Yun Fengji asked. When Bloodthirsty heard this, He smiled and said, "Of course you go. Is it possible that this beast bead is what I want? Of course, if you don't want it, it's not impossible for me to go." But Yun Fengji's figure had already arrived around the stone pillar. She didn't listen to anything Shuexie said just now. Bloodthirsty. The bloodthirsty man sighed helplessly. His eyes scanned the surroundings slightly, especially when he stopped for a long time at the 8 statues of ferocious beasts. He found that these statues were very violent. It brings a sense of crisis to bloodthirsty, a bad atmosphere. If Yun Fengji takes that bead, these 8 statues should cause us some trouble. Bloodthirsty murmured. Among the 8 statues, Yun Fengji first carefully observed the whole body of the bead, then put it in his bag, took a look around, and immediately walked back without any hesitation about his mission. Because she also felt the ominous aura. But at this moment, the ground began to shake, and the 8 surrounding statues emitted a strange light. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 123. I saw that the eyes of all the statues began to turn reddish, as if they were like devils in hell. Bloodthirsty frown. The next moment, a terrifying sound reached their ears. This sound sounds like something is about to be resurrected. Yun Fengji naturally heard this voice. But she didn't look back, didn't stop, but walked straight towards the bloodthirsty side. And the will-o'-the-wisp in bloodthirsty's hand is ready. Looking at the will-o'-the-wisp in his hand, his bloodthirsty complexion began to turn cold. He looked at the statues, his eyes flashed, and he aimed at the 8 statues and threw them. I saw 8 dark will-o'-the-wisps rushing towards 8 statues. Bah! As soon as the 8 statues were contaminated with will-o'-the-wisps, they burned instantly. The statue made another terrible sound, as if it was suffering some kind of pain. A pair of blood-red eyes kept flashing. The next moment, the 8 statues began to shatter, and the will-o'-the-wisp slowly disappeared. Bloodthirsty looked up and saw that the 8 statues turned into 8 dark black gases, and the gas flowed slowly like a spiritual snake. Then they merged together and turned into a monster whose face could not be seen clearly. 6 arms, 4 legs. Such a terrifying-looking monster appeared in their eyes. The monster stretched out 6 arms and made a strange sound from its mouth. Then he raised his blood-red eyes and stared directly at the 2 of them. A hoarse voice resounded in their ears. Humans. My enemies. Kill. Upon hearing this emotionless voice, the 2 of them changed their expressions, took out the spirit weapon, and began to deal with it. But before the 2 of them could react, the monster's figure had already appeared in front of Bloodthirsty, and 6 arms showed black blood claws, clawing straight at Bloodthirsty's chest. Aha! Cough! He was caught directly in the chest. The bloodthirsty body suddenly fell back, and a ferocious claw mark appeared on his chest. Touching the black blood on his chest, he frowned bloodthirstily and murmured to himself, "What is this? Could it be that this damn thing is an ancient monster?" But the black shadow didn't give him a chance to breathe, and once again stretched out its poisonous claws and rushed towards the bloodthirsty. Just this time, he didn't aim at Bloodthirsty's chest, but at Bloodthirsty's neck, as if he wanted to kill it with one blow. But Bloodthirsty had just been attacked by him, and he had been wary of him for a long time. How could he be given a chance? Hearing the whistling sound in his ears, his bloodthirsty eyes moved. Moment. 2 demon figures appeared in front of him, blocking the monster's claws. Boom. The 2 demon figures were instantly shattered as soon as he caught them. Turned into a trace of bubbles. The difference in strength between the 2 is not at the same level at all. But the moment he blocked it was enough for a bloodthirsty counterattack. I saw a bloodthirsty shout, "Destroy all demons." The words have fallen. Zhou Shen's will-o'-the-wisp spread all over the place, slowly gathering into a demon. The devil raised his eyes and screamed strangely. The two didn't say much, and they were fighting together the next moment. Boom! Bang bang! Will-o'-the-wisps are raging and there are constant claw marks. The two fought for hundreds of rounds in an instant. It seems that the two are evenly matched, but in fact, the spiritual power of the demon summoned by Bloodthirsty has begun to slowly dissipate. According to this situation, if the two fight for dozens of rounds, the demon will be reduced to nothing. Then the Bloodthirsty will really be over. But, just at this moment, Yun Fengji's voice resounded in the Bloodthirsty mind. The strength of this monster is close to that of the martial arts world. We are not his opponents yet. We just need to block him. There is no need to fight him hard. We should find an opportunity to leave first. Hearing this, his bloodthirsty eyes moved and he nodded. Immediately, Yun Fengji, who was behind him, directly released his ultimate move. Qi Ming Fengjian. Swish. A phoenix shadow shimmering with golden light rushed directly towards the back of the monster. All I heard was a bang. A bloody hole was punched directly into his back. There is still black blood flowing in it. Ah! The monster felt a little pain and yelled. His blood-red eyes lit up and he looked at Yun Fengji behind him. Human race, you are looking for death. Wait. Click. I saw a giant hand from the sky descending from the sky. The giant hand flashed with black light and grabbed Yun Fengji. Yun Fengji saw the scene and moved to avoid being captured by the giant hand. She didn't have that much energy to continue fighting, and her eyes indicated bloodthirsty. The latter understood the meaning and nodded. Next moment. Then the will-o'-the-wisps on the bloodthirsty hands became more intense. I saw bloodthirsty hands clasping together, gathering the will-o'-the-wisps together. In less than a breath, a huge body-shaped demon appeared in front of him. To release this move, he used about 70% of his spiritual power. His face was inevitably a little pale, but he still gritted his teeth and endured it. The bloodthirsty will-o'-the-wisps keep coming out. He controlled the demon and rushed towards the monster. The monster has already noticed his scene. Don't worry about Yun Fengji anymore. He rushed forward. Boom. Bang bang. The two fought together instantly. But how can a monster with only martial sovereign strength fight a monster with martial venerable strength? Within 3 breaths, it was instantly shattered. But this little time is enough for the two of them to escape. After the monsters finished dealing with the monsters, they found that the two figures had completely disappeared and appeared outside the cave. See this. The monster howled in pain, its breath shook the palace and began to vent. Ah! Terrifying sounds kept wandering around the hall. Outside the cave, the two figures appear here. Huoyi also noticed it, and sat in front of the two of them with a black magic python. Senior brother and sister, how's it going? You should have gotten it, right? Bloodthirsty glanced at him and nodded. We have succeeded, but we encountered some troubles during the process and almost died inside. Speaking of this, he looked at his chest with bloodlust. I can't help but feel like crying without tears. The matter itself was obtained with the help of Yun Fengji, but he himself was accidentally injured, but Yun Fengji was fine at all. But he didn't care about anything. The strength of the monster just now has completely reached the martial arts venerable realm world. It is a real person, not something like the black demon python that is firmly suppressed by the Tianqian secret realm. If it weren't for Shuexia and Yun Fengji who had just resurrected and hadn't fully recovered their own strength, otherwise they would really have died there today. Listening to the bloodthirsty reply, Huoyi looked a little confused and couldn't help but ask, did you encounter something deadly? Yun Fengji nodded and said, yes, it should be an ancient monster, sealed in 8 statues to guard the beast bead. As long as someone comes to seize the beast beads, they will be resurrected and turned into monsters. At this point, Yun Fenji may have felt something was wrong, so she shook her head and said, "This can only be my guess. It doesn't necessarily mean that the beast bead is guarded here, or it may be sealed here by a powerful being." Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 124. Huoyi nodded thoughtfully. But the bloodthirsty here showed a puzzled look and said puzzledly, "I have a little doubt, why did I encounter this monster this time, and why didn't I find it where Huoyi and I went before?" After hearing this, Yun Fenji glanced at him curiously, "Are you sure?" Bloodthirsty nodded and said, "Of course I'm sure, there are the same guardians of ferocious beast statues as here, but I didn't encounter monsters or anything like that. I got the beast beads very easily." Yunfen raised his clothes slightly, looked thoughtful for a while, glanced at Bloodthirsty and said, "Maybe it's your luck. It's also possible that the monster was not completely resurrected, and you happened to take the beast bead at that time." Shuexia nodded when he heard this. Maybe it was indeed what Yun Fenji said. "Say it." The few of them didn't say anything else, got on the black magic python and left here. Qin Xian, who was in the Profound Heaven sect, also saw the scene and frowned slightly. "It seems that there are many things I don't know about in this Tianqian secret realm." After Qin Xian finished speaking, the voice of the system sounded in his mind. "Ding, issue a mission, let the number of disciples in the sect reach tens of thousands, the qualifications cannot be lower than middle grade, time limit, 3 months. At the same time, Profound Heaven sect must also have a very wide reputation in Profound Heaven continent, for example, reaching the level of forces such as Tiangong. The elders of each department in the Profound Heaven sect have reached the martial venerable level, and the lowest level has reached the martial sect, so the host is asked to start developing to the next step, and cannot stay in this small place, and the host is asked to take a long-term view. After completing this mission, you can obtain 3 low-level martial emperor experts, 10 martial saint experts, and an ancient divine weapon and ancient imperial bell." Hearing the words of the system in his mind, Qin Xian couldn't help but be shocked, and said without tears, "System, are you serious? I only have one strong martial emperor now, but you allowed me to gain such power as Tiangong. Fame, do you think this is possible? I really want to ask the system if you have drifted away. I don't think Profound Heaven sect defeated Tiangong this time. Just send me such a task. This is a bit difficult, system." But unfortunately, the system did not reply to his message. "As if you didn't hear it?" Seeing this, Qin Xian let out a long sigh, almost wanting to cry but without tears. He spread his hands helplessly and said, "Forget it, this reward is pretty good. If you want to get the prestigious title, you have to look for other opportunities. It seems that the 2 major forces, Soul Palace and Shadow Palace, have to develop in the central region." Qin Xian looked outside the hall with burning eyes. "Say it." Zhongyue. Outside the Tianqian secret realm valley. Ling put his hands on his back, straightened his body, and looked into the valley as if he was thinking about something. "It's been a few days since Tianqian secret realm started. It should be over in a few days. Bloodthirsty and the others are about to come out. What I'm most worried about right now is, will they conflict or fight with the people from Tiangong?" Ling murmured. "If we really deal with the Tiangong group, how should we explain it to the Tiangong group this time? Is it possible to fight them directly? But in this case, our current strength is simply not enough. Well." Thinking of this, Ling sighed slightly, shook his head, turned around and returned to his palace. But the 3 old men from Tiangong are still staying on the top of the mountain. Seeing their expressions becoming more and more anxious. After all, the premonition of danger in their minds is getting stronger and stronger, and now that Tianqian secret realm is about to end, they are afraid that something unexpected will happen. Chu Xian looked at the faces of the 2 of them and said, Tianqian's secret realm is about to end, and the premonition is getting stronger. I always feel that something is going to happen. What do you think? Hearing Chu Xian's words, Yan Qing and Yifeng looked at each other, nodded and said, "We feel it too." But Yifeng spread his hands and said, "It's useless to feel it. After all, they are now in the Tianqian secret realm, and we don't have the strength to break in directly." Speaking of this, Yifeng glanced at the two of them and said, "So I think it's better to wait. After all, this hunch is sometimes inaccurate." Seeing this, the two nodded and said nothing more. I saw Tianqian's secret realm. Today, the number of survivors in Tianqian's secret realm is around 32. Among them, everyone in Tiangong has died, and so have some small sections. They are not the lucky ones to survive. As for Suanmen and Guzang, almost all of them survived, and those who survived have arrived at the center of Tianqian's secret realm. There is no magnificent and majestic hall here, but a huge and ancient altar. There are statues of ferocious beasts and mythical beasts scattered around the altar. There is also a staircase that goes straight up to the sky and the earth. And in the center, there is a man holding a golden holy sword and wearing a golden battle armor, standing there with a domineering expression. Although it is a statue, it feels like a lifelike god general. Under the statue, there are still more than a dozen figures talking non-stop, and the number of figures is still increasing. There were more than 20 people. Those people are the people who survived in Tianqian's secret realm, including Zhang Xuanyi and Guo Zheng. And after the time for a cup of tea, the bloodthirsty three-man rider, the black demon python, also arrived here. Naturally, it also attracted a lot of attention and caused extensive conversations. This should be the group of people from Profound Heaven Sect. Why are they riding a monster? I don't know. But the aura of this monster is so strong, I'm afraid its strength has reached above that of Martial Sovereign. Yeah. Listening to everyone's whispers, Huo Yi glanced at everyone lightly. But Bloodthirsty and Yun Fengji's expressions were expressionless. This is a small scene for both of them. Finally, the three of them rode the black python and arrived under the statue. This approach also attracted the attention of people from all major forces. For example, Zhang Xuanyi and Guo Zheng. Someone made a shocked sound. After all, everyone knows that Profound Heaven Sect gave Tiangong a slap in the face in the Five Realms competition, so naturally it also provoked Tiangong. Tiangong also sent several disciples with outstanding strength to Tianqian's secret realm. Don't even think about it, they are all here to target the Profound Heaven Sect. But now the people in the Heavenly Palace have not seen it. Instead, I saw that Profound Heaven Sect and others arrived here intact, and even obtained a powerful monster. This can't help but make everyone start to wonder. The answer they all came up with was that the people in Tiangong were killed. But no one dared to ask carefully. After all, who knows what happened to the people in Tiangong? What if the people of Heavenly Palace were killed by the people of Profound Heaven Sect? Then aren't they looking for trouble? So everyone suppressed their curiosity. On the contrary, they actually like to see the people in the Heavenly Palace being deflated. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 125. Say it. Huo Yi looked at the tall statue and said to the two of them, "Now that we have arrived at the center of Tianqian's secret realm, why is there only a large group of statues and an altar here? Isn't it supposed to be a space passage?" When Yun Fengji heard this, she shook her head and said, "I don't know, maybe I need to wait for some kind of opportunity." Opportunity? Bloodthirsty frowned when he heard this. I glanced around and found that there was nothing obvious about the countless ferocious beasts and mythical beast statues here. Just like an ordinary statue. Wei Wei thought for a while and said, "I have already inspected the area, and there is nothing strange. Even if there is the opportunity you mentioned, there should be something obvious. But look, there is only a ruined altar and a lot of statues here, and there is nothing else. Yun Fengji glanced at Bloodthirsty, frowned and said nothing. And no one else noticed anything. Everyone was sitting on the ground, quietly meditating. Someone is having a conversation, too. Almost half an hour passed. No one thought of anything, other than talking a lot of nonsense, they were just admiring the statue. But at this moment, a monster with a horn and a black robe appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was shocked and quickly stood up to look at him. The three bloodthirsty trio also discovered him. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that this one-horned monster looked somewhat similar to the monster they had seen in the valley before. I saw a pair of blood-red eyes of the monster high in the sky, constantly scanning everyone, as if looking for something. Until I saw the three bloodthirsty people staying under the statue. A pair of eyes shimmered. Immediately, he laughed strangely, and a long knife obtained from somewhere appeared in his hand, and he slashed at the three of them. His cold words reached the ears of the three of them, "You escaped from my side just now, and now I have found you. Let's see where you run away this time." After hearing this, the expressions of the three people changed. "Why did he come here?" Bloodthirsty frowned. Before he could continue thinking, he quickly used the will-o'-the-wisp and began to deal with the incoming blade. Boom! Dust and smoke are everywhere. I saw Yun Fengji and Xue Xue cooperate with each other to block the knife. Bloodthirsty coughed a few times. He looked at the monster warily, as if he didn't understand why he followed him. Yun Fengji beside him glanced at the monster and said to Bloodthirst, "Don't worry about how he came here. We are already in trouble and we must deal with him." Bloodthirsty nodded, and the will-o'-the-wisps all over his body began to burn. "Get ready for the next move." Huo Yi heard the conversation between the two, and a blue flame appeared in his hand, which was the holy fire of Azure Lotus. "It seems that this monster should be the thing that senior brother and sister said before that he was in trouble," Huo Yi said to himself with a serious face. When everyone saw the monster's figure and actions, they couldn't help but exclaimed. "Start talking quietly. What is this monster with one horn? It looks so powerful." "I don't know. But judging from the situation of this thing, it seems that it is looking for the three people from Profound Heaven section. It should be none of our business. We can just stand aside and watch the show." As soon as the words fell, then I saw the monster high in the sky swaying. The terrifying aura all over his body is released. The next moment, all I saw was high in the sky. Countless monsters appeared, and without exception, each monster has a martial sovereign in its own strength. This approach caused the group of theatergoers to panic for a while. It seems like this monster is not just looking at the people in Profound Heaven section, it seems that it wants to kill us too. One person said with a worried look. "But how could the people around us not notice this? I have already taken out my spirit weapon and started to deal with it." Even Zhang Xuanyi and Guo Jing couldn't help but look serious, and took out the spirit weapon and started to deal with it. "What on earth is this?" Zhang Xuanyi murmured. Seeing this scene, Huo Yi, who was next to Xue Xie, looked at the two of them and asked, "Brother and sister, what should we do? Should we go up and fight him directly? Should we wait for an opportunity before attacking?" Hearing Huo Yi's inquiry, Xue Xie shook his head and said, "We must not fight him head-on. He is too strong. With our current strength, we are no match for him. We can only find a way. But the main thing is, this monster won't give us a chance, so what can we do?" Huo Yi said with a helpless expression. When Bloodthirsty heard this, he didn't say anything and stared at the monster tightly. "There is another way, that is to wait for the space passage to appear," Yun Fengji said. Hearing this, the two of them looked at Yun Fengji. Then Yun Fengji continued, "Waiting for the space passage, we just need to wait for the space passage to appear, so that we don't have to fight this monster head-on, but..." Yun Fengji seemed to have thought of something again and stopped talking. Seeing this, Bloodthirsty looked a little confused and didn't understand why she didn't continue talking. Huo Yi, who was next to him, asked nervously, "What's wrong? Senior sister? Why don't you continue?" Yun Fengji raised her head and glanced at the two of them, shook her head and said, "But we must prepare for the worst. It is obvious that the Tianqian secret realm has ended at this time, but the space channel has not yet appeared. This means that the Tianqian secret realm has not yet appeared. There may be something wrong in the Xian secret realm." Bloodthirsty frowned and nodded. In fact, Yun Fengji is still waiting for someone to come out. If he comes out, the matter will not be so troublesome. That was the person who was rescued under the leadership of the little thing. It's Wusu. As the master of Tianqian secret realm, Yun Fengji believed that he had a way, and at the same time, he hoped that Wusu would notice this scene. How many people can continue to say anything? Then they saw that the monster high in the sky was already rushing towards them. And his many clones began to follow. Seeing this, everyone decided to rush forward and fight these clones. After all, they don't think this monster is a good person, and they can tell just by looking at his appearance. Instead of waiting for the bloodthirsty trio to be defeated, why not get up and fight these monsters yourself? Boom! Bang bang bang! I saw the sound of fighting everywhere near the altar. However, the situation is not optimistic. I don't think the difference in strength is too big. He was always being crushed by monster clones and had no power to fight back. Almost everyone's strength is at the martial king level, but only a few people have reached the martial sovereign level. Looking back at the monsters, their strength has reached the peak of martial sovereign. If they weren't all geniuses in the sect, if it had been anyone else, they would have been instantly killed by the monster's clone as soon as they entered the scene. Xue Xue and Yun Fengji saw the charging monster, looked at each other and nodded. Then each of them unleashed all their strength and began to deal with it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 126. Then you can see the bloodthirsty will-o'-the-wisps keep coming out. In an instant, dozens of monsters appeared in front of him and rushed forward after him. And Yun Fengji also began to summon the Phantom of the Phoenix. The sword in your hand keeps evaporating. The monster smiled coldly when he saw this. Just this little trick? You dare to fight me? You are really looking for death. As soon as he finished speaking, the monster's own aura exploded. A giant fist blasted out. Boom! A dark black fist shadow rushed towards Bloodthirsty with an unstoppable momentum. Wherever it passed, all the summoned demons were turned into nothing, and they couldn't even resist it for a breath. And Bloodthirsty has no time to hide. Boom! He firmly withstood the punch. Ah! I saw his figure keep retreating. After smashing more than a dozen statues in a row, he finally stopped. However, at this time, he no longer had the strength to stand up. His whole body was replaced by blood. The body was covered in blood and flesh, and the cold face was completely destroyed, replaced by a person whose face could not be seen clearly. Not good. Yun Fengji's expression changed here. After calming down carefully, he looked at Huo Yi aside and said, "Hurry up and find a place to hide. You can't resist the strength of this monster." But senior sister, Huo Yi looked hesitant when he heard this. But Yun Fengji just gave him a cold look and shouted, "If you don't want to die, just leave." These words have an irresistible tone, but also a hint of helplessness. Seeing this, Bloodthirsty clenched his fists and nodded heavily. Then he ran away to the altar behind him. Naturally, the monster also saw this scene. But he just glanced at it coldly and ignored it. For him, there was no difference between escaping or not. After finishing Yun Fengzhong, he would go find him Huo Yi. Looking at Yun Fengji's figure, the monster walked towards her coldly. With every step he took, the pressure he exerted became heavier and heavier, until Yun Fengji was crushed to the ground, unable to stand up at all. Snort. The monster smiled coldly. Phew. Yun Fengji spit out a mouthful of blood and turned pale. Stick your sword straight into the ground to prevent yourself from falling. As for why she didn't escape? Because she knows that with her current strength, there is not much difference between escaping and not escaping. The monster is staring at her, and there is no use for her to escape. Instead, it will harm other people. Might as well stay where you are. Because Yun Fengji has a feeling that even if she encounters the semi-immortal realm, she will not die directly, but will live for a reason. She didn't know why, but this feeling gave her great confidence. As for the black demon python, it had already been firmly pressed to the ground by the monster's momentum, and its huge body seemed so useless. The monster looked at Yun Fengji, Chen Yuloyan, and her slim and beautiful figure, without any change in her eyes. He walked up to her, looked into her eyes, and said, "The human race is indeed the same waste as before." Cold and emotionless words came from the monster's mouth. Hearing this, Yun Fengji smiled disdainfully and said, "You are just bullying people at a low level. If I return to my peak, how can an ant like you look directly at me?" Snort. Seeing that Yun Fengji was not afraid of him at all, he also felt that his life was in danger because he lost. This approach made the monster chuckle. I didn't feel angry because of Yun Fengji's words. He nodded and said, "Yes, I do overwhelm others with my level." "Yes? Do you think this is wrong?" Yun Fengji said nothing and looked at him with an unchanged expression. "You are indeed different from these people. I feel the perseverance in your heart. This spirit will never surrender to others. And you also have an indescribable powerful force in your heart. I have carefully examined it and I can't shake it with my current strength." Can. At this point, the monster's eyes glowed red. "It's only now. My strength will become stronger in the future, until it surpasses what's in your heart. And you are just an ant now. I can seriously injure you with just a snap of my fingers. You still have no way to do anything. Isn't that the man who was with you just now?" The monster pointed at the bloodthirsty not far away. "He was knocked down without even being able to withstand my blow. Isn't this an ant? If you have the guts, improve your strength and fight me openly instead of trying to use force to overwhelm others." There was a trace of amusement on the corner of the monster's mouth, and his eyes were faint. Since his resurrection, he has slowly begun to turn into a human. He already has human feelings and thoughts. Perhaps he became like this because he absorbed human emotions. This is also the scary part about him. You can understand it just by looking at what his clone does. He didn't let his clones kill all these people, but controlled them all. Because he will then turn all the thoughts of these people into pure spiritual power and pass it into his body, so as to become more like a human race. Perhaps this is why he was sealed. His ability is very abnormal, and it has transformed into a very terrifying ability for a race. Yun Fengji didn't speak, her eyes were tightly closed. When the monster saw her like this, he didn't care about her anymore, but looked at the people under control. Looking at these people, he seemed to have seen some treasure. "Next, let me get that pure power, and let me see what happened to the profound heaven continent over the years." The words have fallen. I saw that all the monster clones began to turn into black beads. The beads rotated in a circle and began to carefully search everyone's bodies. They found a place where it was easier to sneak into their hearts, passed through them, and entered their bodies. The moment everyone was penetrated by the beads, their expressions began to become distorted, and their teeth kept biting, as if they were suffering some kind of pain. "Ah! What is this?" I can't seem to control my body. Me too. The next moment. Then everyone's eyes turned dark black, their struggling bodies began to stop, and their expressions became stiff, as if they had turned into some kind of puppet. Then, they were seen slowly standing up and starting to walk around the altar. Looking down from a high altitude, you can see that everyone seems to be standing in an orderly position, like some kind of formation. When everyone found their positions, the monster's figure moved and appeared in the middle of everyone. His body slowly floated in mid-air, seeming to merge with the void. Then, everyone's eyes emitted a trace of black light and changed into the original black beads, and their expressions began to slowly recover. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 127. Not even Huoyi escaped. As for Bloodthirsty, the monster did not kill him again. He glanced at him slightly and stopped caring. Because the monster noticed that deep inside the bloodthirsty body, there was something that frightened him. It was because of this thing that he dared not take action against Bloodthirsty. He was afraid that after killing Bloodthirsty, that thing would come out. As for Yun Fengji, he just said that Yun Fengji has a perseverance deep in his heart, and he also possesses a treasure like the phoenix essence and blood, which makes him dare not touch it. Say it. I saw all the black beads surrounding the monster. Hear a whoosh. All the black beads entered his body. Next moment, the monster's body began to change, and the original 6 arms and 4 legs began to turn into 2 hands and 2 legs. The originally terrifying body gradually turned into a human body. The single horn on his head also turned into long flowing black hair, and his face turned into a majestic middle-aged man. Ah! So comfortable. The monster gave out a sense of joy. He opened his eyes, looked at his body, and smiled. Although the human race is useless, their bodies are very perfect. No wonder so many species like to transform into the human race. This feeling of complete control of the body is so wonderful. The monster laughed. His voice is no longer as hoarse as before, but instead makes people feel gentle. Yun Fengji swallowed the pill and looked at him quietly with her eyes. Boom. But that's it? I saw the void nearby began to shake violently because of something. Click, 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 click. A space crack appeared in mid-air. Ta-ta-ta. The sound of light footsteps came. I saw the figure of a young man stepping out of the crack in space. Yun Fengji raised her eyes to look at this person, her eyes moved slightly. There is a hint of doubt on the face. It seemed that he didn't understand why he appeared at this time. This young man is Wusu. I saw Wusu's deep eyes, constantly scanning the surroundings as if looking for someone. It wasn't until he saw Yun Fengji half kneeling on the ground that his eyes stopped. His figure moved and appeared in front of Yun Fengji. Looking at Yun Fengji's embarrassed yet beautiful figure, Wusu smiled and said, "It seems you are in some trouble. Do you need my help?" Wusu's clear voice sounded in Yun Fengji's mind. Yun Fengji looked up at him, nodded slightly and said, "Then I'll trouble you." Hearing this, Wusu laughed and waved his hand. Immediately, his eyes stared at the monster like an eagle. The pressure all over his body was like a flood, crushing the monster to the ground. Ah! The monster let out a low groan, and a trickle of sweat broke out on his forehead. Then he looked up at Wusu with gloomy eyes and said, "As the master of Secret Realm and the one who makes the rules, you came to help them without any trouble. Don't you know that this is a violation of the agreement of heaven?" Agreement. Wusu chuckled, and his figure instantly appeared in front of him. He leaned over and looked at the monster and said, "All promises are just floating clouds. Besides, didn't you violate it? You didn't stay in the statue to sleep well, but you ran out. Harm everyone." Snort. The monster snorted and said angrily, "This is different. If this woman had not taken the beast bead, How could I have chased her to look for her? And that guy too. The monster's eyes looked bloodthirsty in the distance. Then he looked at Wusu and said, unless they return the beast beads to me, I'm not afraid even if you do it yourself. After hearing this, Wusu's face turned slightly cold. If just now he was like the sun in spring, now he is like the ice and snow in winter. The cold is biting. Yun Fengji watched the two of them talking with her eyes. She already understood the conversation between the two. There was no way she could exchange the beast beads back. If Wusu agrees, Yun Fengji will directly use the phoenix essence and blood to fight to the death. No matter whether she wins or loses, she will try. After all, how could he easily return something he had finally obtained? Did the beast bead have a name written on it indicating that he was a monster? Absolutely not. You are looking for death, do you know that? The monster said nothing and looked at him with an unchanged expression. The little thing's figure also appeared on Wusu's head. He said some unintelligible words in his mouth. But you can tell by the little thing's expression that this is a curse. The monster probably understood the meaning, but he still stood there with an unchanging expression. Seeing him like this, Wusu didn't want to say anything more, and his own sense of oppression began to increase. I'm sorry, this secret realm is my decision. What I just said to you is just to give the person behind you a face. Since you are so ignorant, then I don't need to talk nonsense with you anymore. After Wusu finished speaking, his figure appeared in the sky. It's like a god coming from heaven. Then, the monster's healthy body suddenly began to slowly break into pieces, as if it was shedding its skin. The monster's face was suddenly shocked at this scene. He wanted to resist, but found that he couldn't even control his body now, and there was no chance of resistance at all. How many breaths have passed? His body began to turn red, until it turned into fragments one after another, turning into its original terrifying appearance. Click. Boom. Traces of black gas emerged from his body. This is the energy he just absorbed from everyone's bodies. And at this moment, everything started to return to everyone. Ah! The monster opened its palms and yelled at the sky unwillingly. The people behind me will not let you go. The words have fallen. The monster's body turned into a trace of bubbles and disappeared between heaven and earth. Humph, Wusu looked at the scene coldly. As for what the monster said about the people behind him not letting him go, Wusu is not afraid. After he understands what happened, he is no longer the Wusu he was before. If that person dares to come, he will fight with him personally until he dies. He had just talked to the monster, and it was the monster who was insisting on this matter, otherwise Wusu would not have killed him and would have spared his life. He did not want to talk to that person now because of this matter. Wusu has been sleeping for too long, and has not fully recovered from his peak strength. Now he can only perform at the peak of the martial emperor. Then, he quickly disappeared into the sky and appeared in front of Yun Fengji. Seeing Yun Fengji's serious injuries, Wusu couldn't help but chuckle. Your injury is a bit serious. Do you need me to help you recover? Hearing this, Yun Fengji nodded. She won't refuse, but she won't forget this favor either. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 128. Wusu smiled, then raised his palm, and a trace of cool spiritual power flew into Yun Fengji's body like a spiritual snake. The next moment, Yun Fengji recovered from all the injuries she had just suffered. Feeling the gentle spiritual power deep in her heart, Yun Fengji shook her flowing hair, stood up, looked at Wusu with a smile, arched her body and said thank you. Wusu smiled and waved his hand, no problem. As if he thought of something again, he looked at the bloodthirsty not far away and said, does your fellow disciple need my help to recover? Hearing this, Yun Fengji turned to look at the unconscious bloodthirsty in the distance, and nodded without thinking. Then I'll trouble you. Wusu nodded slightly, and with a move of his palm, a trace of spiritual power flew into the bloodthirsty body. In less than a breath, the serious injuries in Bloodthirsty's body recovered intact. Even the hidden injuries that this body suffered before have recovered. But the bloodlust shows no signs of awakening. Seeing this, Wusu explained to Yun Fengji, he still has to make adjustments. He will not wake up so quickly. It will take about a quarter of an hour to recover. Yun Fengji nodded. He thought of something and asked, Tianqian's secret realm should have ended, right? Why didn't the passage to the outside world just appear? Upon hearing the question, Wusu looked slightly embarrassed, coughed slightly and said, that's because I just woke up and the spiritual power and channel energy in the secret realm were absorbed by me, so the channel didn't appear just now. Understood, Yun Fengji nodded. Say it. The two did not talk again. Only in front of everyone. The space channel appeared without any warning. This is the passage to the outside world. It was released by Wusu. The people have disappeared, leaving only this passage. Bloodthirsty also goes through what Wusu said. It took half an hour to wake up. As soon as he woke up, Suathirsty felt no pain but a comfortable feeling, which made him look a little confused. But I remember that I was seriously injured, but now I don't feel any pain. Stand up and look at your chest. I found that the original claw marks had disappeared, leaving only some dried blood stains all over my body. Seeing this situation, Shue took a closer look at himself and found that there were no injuries in his body. Before he could make a sound of surprise, Yun Fengji walked up to him in the distance and said calmly, okay, no need to check anymore, your injury has recovered. Hearing this, Shue looked up at Yun Fengji and said, did you fix my injury? Yun Fengji glanced at him, shook her head and said, it's not me. Do you still remember the master I told you before? Bloodthirsty thought about it carefully and nodded. He was the one who helped you recover from your injuries. Not long after you were unconscious, he appeared in time to kill the monster, and then saved your life. Then, after spending half a stick of incense, Yun Fengji explained everything to Bloodthirsty. Bloodthirsty nodded, I owe this person a favor. Then he looked at the space channel in front of him and asked, this should be what you said the master made. Yun Fengji nodded. Yes, this is the space passage leading to the outside world. Now that your injury is healed, we can go out. Good. Then he looked at Huo Yi, who was dazed not far away, and said through the voice, you kid, stop being in a daze, wake up the black demon python and take him out. Huo Yi, who was still in a daze, came back to his senses when he heard this, looked at Shue not far away and nodded. Then he ran to wake up the black python that was in a coma. He directly released a stream of flames and hit the black demon python, shouting, wake up! Stop sleeping, the bloodthirsty brother is calling you. Hearing this, the black demonic python raised its heavy eyelids, looked at Huo Yi, and then looked at Swexy not far away, and found that he was staring at him. Seeing him, the black demonic python quickly got up and nodded with its huge head. Yes, I understand. Say it. I can only walk out of the space channel. Outside world. The elders of the major forces are already standing in the nearby mountains, quietly waiting for the disciple to return. Lingu naturally also found a mountain peak, with a calm face, waiting patiently here. Click, 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 click. A space passage 2 people high appeared in front of everyone. Lingu quickly looked up. I found that the person who walked out was Zhang Xuanyi from Suanmen. This can't help but make Lingu a little disappointed. He really hoped to write about the safe return of the 3 of them. Another half a while passed. Several more space passages appear. Lingu quickly looked again. It was discovered that the people who came out were Guojing of the Black Demon Sect and disciples of various major forces. Alas! Not so, Ling looked a little downcast. This situation is inevitable. Maybe the three of them have also encountered some troubles, Ling murmured. In addition to him, the three major worshippers on the top of the mountain also looked very anxious. What's going on? The disciples of Black Demon Sect and Suanmen have already come out, why haven't my disciples from Tiangong come out yet? Yan Qing looked confused and whispered. Yifeng glanced at him, took a sip of tea slowly, and said, "Wait patiently, don't be impatient. Didn't you see that the people from Profound Heaven Sect didn't come out? Maybe they are in the final competition, or maybe it's because Zhou and the others are delayed by something." Seeing this, the two nodded and said no more. After a while, click, 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 click. Another space crack appears. And the people who came out were none other than the three from Profound Heaven Sect. When Ling Gu saw this scene, his worried face turned into a smile, and he said secretly, "Those people from Tiangong haven't come out for so long." As expected, the three of them, bloodthirsty, have already taken care of the Tiangong disciples. Then Ling Gu looked worried again. But this also means that we will encounter some troubles next. Ling Gu looked at the three people in Tiangong with his eyes. I saw that the three guardians of the Tiangong frowned and looked at a few people with slightly narrowed eyes. Yan Qing looked at the two people beside him and whispered, "The three of them came out intact. Does that mean this?" Yifeng's expression changed and he didn't know what to say. Seeing the expressions of the two of them, Chu Xian waved his hands, sighed slightly, adjusted his emotions and said, "Don't worry, there should be a chance. We know the strength of Zhou and the others, how can they die so easily? In the Tianqian secret realm, please wait patiently for a while." The two of them glanced at him, thought about it for a while, and nodded. Click, 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 click. Half an hour has passed. Some people look lonely, some people look happy, and some people are worried. After all, no new pseudo-space passage has appeared for half an hour, so this does not mean that the remaining people did not come out alive. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 129. An old man looked sad and his body was stooped. Seeing this scene, Yao Yao sighed and said, "How should I explain this to the sect leader? That was the hope of my sect. Why did he die in it like this?" The old man made a sad voice. The people near him also heard the old man's words, but they just glanced at him and didn't pay much attention to it. After all, this kind of situation was not uncommon, and the person who died was not a member of their family anyway. On the left side of the old man, a middle-aged man saw this with a faint look in his eyes. After thinking for a while, he walked to the old man's side, patted his shoulder, and persuaded him, "Forget it about looking for the old man. Maybe I, the Qingtian sect, don't have my boy does not have this fate, and there is nothing he can do about dying in the Tianqian secret realm. Over the past generations, countless geniuses have died in the Tianqian secret realm, and there is no shortage of one from our sect." Middle-aged the man shook his head. "Go back and explain patiently to the sect master. My boy's death is just a slight pity for our section, it is not fatal. I think among the tens of thousands of disciples of our Qingtian sect, there are also a few geniuses among them. Although their talents are not as strong as mine, they will grow up to help. It's okay for the sect to be in charge of power. My brave death does not mean that our Qingtian sect has no successors. Don't cry because of this trivial matter, our Qingtian sect still needs a little face." Hearing this, the old man glanced at him, wiped away the tears, nodded, and his face began to become cold. A pair of eyes that see through the world scanned the people nearby. Seeing this, everyone quickly looked away and looked elsewhere. After all, this tearful old man is Wu Yazi, the great elder of the Qingtian section. His cultivation is unparalleled in ancient times and today. He has reached the peak of the low-level martial emperor. He can break 10,000 fists with one hand and has few opponents at the same level. There is nothing the old man can do about crying. There is no resurrection after death. Wu Yazi shed tears. Firstly, Wu Yong is the hope of Qingtian sect, and secondly, Wu Yong was trained by him. Although Wu Yong's disciple is the master of Qingtian sect, he is actually the one who teaches Wu Yong cultivation and martial arts, because as the master of Qingtian sect, he has no idea how many things he has to deal with in a day, and he rarely takes the time to teach this apprentice. Therefore, the leader of the Qingtian sect asked Wu Yazi to teach his apprentice well. Wu Yazi lived up to expectations. Food, clothing, housing, transportation, training, and fighting with fellow disciples were all taught by Wu Yazi himself. Wu Yong did not let him down, and with his supreme grade qualifications, he reached the level of martial sovereign at the age of 18, and he even fought against Guo Jing of the Black Demon sect and Zhang Xuanyi of the Suanmen sect. It has been 8 years since Wu Yong entered the sect at the age of 10. During this time, the two of them have looked at each other like father and son, talking to each other. Toothless Son has passed on his legacy to him orally and heart to heart. The two of them are like father and son and brothers, and they have become good teachers and helpful friends. Even a pig would have feelings after 8 years, let alone a toothless one, and if Wu Yong died like this, could he not be sad? But they are not the worst. Other forces are even more brutal than their Qingtian sect. Just like the heavenly palace. All I saw was the top of the mountain. The three major offerings in the heavenly palace sit cross-legged on the futon in the shape of a Chinese character. The three of them had a look of disbelief. Yan Qing looked at the two of them and said, "It's been half an hour, and Zhou Hu and the others haven't come out yet. I think maybe they are really dead as we expected." When Chu Xian heard this, he looked like he wanted to stop talking. He lowered his raised arm and shook his head, "I don't know. But it seems that this is indeed the case." Yi Feng looked at the two of them, stood up, looked at the profound heaven sect in the distance and said, "We Tiangong disciples have not come back, but the people from his profound heaven sect have returned safely. This also represents the people of Tiangong died in their hands. I think we should report this matter to the palace master, or the three of us can go directly to ask for an explanation." Hearing Yi Feng's words, Yan Qing frowned, then shook his head and sighed, "But do we have evidence? We have no evidence at all that Zhou Hu and the others were killed by profound heaven section. If the statement is well founded, you don't even have any basis for asking." "Yes." Chu Xian also echoed, "We don't have any evidence to prove that he profound heaven sect killed him." "Then how should we explain to the palace master?" Yi Feng frowned and looked at the two of them. The two shook their heads after hearing this, and they didn't know how to explain. "I don't know. How about we wait? Maybe something happened to Zhou Hu and the others and they will come out later?" "Is that possible?" Chu Xian looked at the two of them and said. Yan Qing glanced at him and said nothing. He no longer knew what to say. That premonition had begun to gradually decline now. This also meant that Zhou Hu and the others were already dead. What was the point of waiting any longer? "Say it." The three of them stopped talking. They thought for a long time and were ready to report the matter to the palace master. On the spirit boat. Profound heaven sect residence. When Ling waited for the three people to come out, he immediately took them back to Ling's Hu's residence. Several people were sitting on the futon, looking at each other. Ling Guzu looked at the three of them and asked with a smile, "How is it? You should have solved all those people in Tiangong, right?" "That's right." Huo Yi nodded and said, "Actually, Senior Brother Bloodthirsty and I solved them, but to be precise, Senior Brother Bloodthirsty solved them alone, while I was watching the show next to me. After all, with my I can't beat them with strength." Huo Yi touched his head. Ling glanced at him and nodded. Wave your palms far away. I saw a group of tables and chairs flying in front of a few people in the distance. There is also a teapot and teacup on it. Ling used his spiritual power to pour the teapot into several cups one by one, then made a gesture of invitation and said to several people, as long as the solution is clean, the process is not important, as long as the result is perfect. The people in Tiangong have been dealt with. As expected, the three guardians of Tiangong may find us soon, but the strength we have now is not enough to fight them, so I decided to go first. Report it to the sect master and do the next thing. The three of them took a sip of tea and nodded slightly. Having said this, Ling pondered for a while and said, "Did you get anything from this trip to Secret Realm?" Hearing Ling Gu's inquiry, Xue Xue and Yun Fenji looked at each other and said in unison, "I got the beast bead." The two did not choose to hide it, after all, they believed that the elders of their family would not covet it. Beast beads. After hearing this thing, Ling looked a little confused. He had never heard of this thing, so he couldn't help but ask, "What is a beast bead?" Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 130. Seeing this, Yun Fenji began to explain. The beast beads are. After half a stick of incense. Ling looked slightly shocked and said, "You mean, as long as you get this thing, you can reach the legendary semi-immortal realm at least?" "That's right," Yun Fenji nodded. Ling's eyes flashed, and he fell into deep thought again. Several people saw the scene and did not disturb him. They closed their eyes quietly and began to practice. I don't know if the sect master knows about this thing. But I believe that with his strength, the sect master should know and even own this thing, Ling thought to himself. As if he thought of something again, he came back to his senses and looked at the three of them. "By the way, you just said that there is a black dragon in Secret Realm, is it true?" Hearing this, Bloodthirsty nodded and replied, "Yes, it's a black dragon sleeping in the pool. I carefully checked him with my soul power. As expected, the strength of this black dragon has reached at least the semi-immortal level, maybe even higher." What Bloodthirsty said is true. The black dragon must have the strength of a semi-fairyland, but his current strength is too low and he can only barely feel it. Ling nodded and murmured a few words. "Half fairyland, half fairyland." His eyes flashed and he said, "It seems that there are many things hidden in Tianqian's secret realm that we don't know. This is also an opportunity." "Correct." Ling looked at Yun Fenji and said, "You met a powerful senior in Secret Realm, and he also helped you. Judging from this senior's character, he is still very friendly to you. This is also your opportunity. Maybe we can ask the senior for help in the future." Ling looked at Yun Fenji and said. Yun Fenji nodded without saying anything. She didn't know whether Wusu would help her in the future. Maybe it would help or maybe it wouldn't, she couldn't tell. "Say it." The spirit boat started slowly. "Spread your wings, change direction, and fly to Wuchen." After almost half a quarter of an hour, the spirit boat slowly landed in the central square of Wuchen. Everyone saw this and walked down in an orderly manner. Elders who have powerful forces near the square from time to time are waiting here. When they see people from their sect returning, they quickly step up. Ling and the others did not choose to go out at the end, but as soon as the spirit boat landed, they immediately packed up and returned to the palace courtyard. As for Xiaoran and others not waiting here, Ling didn't suggest anything. Passed through the noisy crowd and returned to the courtyard. As soon as he entered the door, he found Xiaoran sitting in the pavilion, talking to an old man with white hair. They didn't know the white-haired old man, so when they saw this, several of them had doubtful looks on their faces. The two were still talking at this moment and did not notice that Ling and the others had returned. The old man took a sip of tea, looked at Xiaoran and said with a smile, "The disciples of your sect should have returned by this time. As the peak master of the sect, Don't you go and receive them, the old man asked. Xiao Ran waved his hand and said, it's okay, Tianqian's secret realm is ending at this time, and I don't need to go to receive it. Oh. The old man nodded with his eyes twinkling slightly. Then he couldn't help but turn his head and look at the door. I found several figures standing there. Seeing this, the old man pointed to the gate and said, Master Xiao. Look at these people at the gate. Are they the disciples and elders of your profound heaven sect? Xiao Ran raised his eyebrows and looked at the door. Realizing that it was Ling Gu and the others, they quickly stood up and asked, you guys are back so soon? Ling Gu chuckled and said, of course we have to come back soon. After all, the three of them caused some trouble in Tianqian's secret realm this time. If we don't come back soon, I'm afraid something unexpected will happen. Oh. Xiao Ran raised his eyebrows and said, did you kill those people from Tiangong? As soon as he said this, the old man next to him showed a hint of shock, as if to say, how could you be so bold? Ling glanced at the old man and nodded slightly. Xiao Ran was not worried, and sat on the chair again, picked up the tea on the table and drank it slowly, and then said, kill him, just kill him. Just report the matter to the sect master. I believe that with the strength of the sect master, he will send strong troops come here. Ling nodded when he heard this. He actually thought so too. Qin Xian, who was located in Profound Heaven sect, saw this scene and smiled helplessly. These guys are using me as a shield. However, this matter is indeed quite troublesome. Qin Xian stroked his chin and his eyes twinkled slightly. He seemed to have thought of something and murmured, it just so happened that a powerful martial emperor was drawn in the lottery these days. Ling Gu and the others also happened to encounter this trouble, so let him help a few people. The words have fallen. A man in black robes stood in the center of the hall with a respectful expression. Qin Xian looked at this person and said, the disciples of our sect have encountered some troubles in the central territory and have provoked a big force. You don't have any position yet, so please protect them secretly. The man's eyes flashed and he nodded slightly. Then the figure disappeared from the place. Seeing the man disappear, Qin Xian seemed to have noticed something was wrong and muttered, by the way, I almost forgot about the mission assigned by the system. Since I sent him, I also happened to send Soul Demon and Shadow Demon to the central territory, letting them lead the strong men of the second palace to develop in the central territory. There will definitely be a battle with the Tiangong palace in the future, and we must arrange the future affairs. Besides, the reward for this mission is quite good, Qin Xian said secretly. Say it. Zhongyao. In the palace courtyard. Ling looked at the strange old man in front of him and asked Xiao Ran, Master Xiao, who is this old man next to you? Hearing Ling Gu's inquiry, Xiao Ran smiled and said, this is an old friend of mine. His name is Wu Yu. I invited him here. Ling Gu nodded and continued to listen. This old friend of mine doesn't have much place to live, and our sect happens to be short of elders. I persuaded him, and he agreed to join our Profound Heaven sect. Oh. Hearing this, Ling Gu looked at the old man with a raised expression, wondering if it was true. Looking at Ling Gu's expression, Wu Yu smiled, nodded, and said, that's right, I'm old enough, and I don't have any descendants or my own place to live. I happen to know Xiao Ran, and he seeing that I had no place to live, he planned to let me join the sect, and I thought for a long time before agreeing to him. Having said this, Wu Yu bowed down, looked at Ling Gu and said, so I hope that the great elder will not dislike me, a person who is trying to save his life. When Ling Gu heard this, his face was shocked, he reacted and quickly helped him up, and then waved to the people behind him to indicate that they could leave. Seeing this, the three of them retreated.